So today is our second paint night painting, and what we're going to be doing is we're going to be painting a bird. We're going to be using complementary colors. We're going to use a violet, which I'm putting on the canvas right now, and we're also going to be using a yellow. I love painting the background first, so then I can use some of that color, that wet color, to add into my piece later on. So typically when I'm painting, I'm usually painting the background first just to give it a quick coat, and then from there I start painting. I'm using a sponge brush for this, and then I just added yellow. So this is going to give it a little bit more dimension, and because it is a complementary color, some areas might look a little bit neutral or brown, but when placed together, complementary colors kind of bounce off of each other. If you would like to use a different set of complementary colors like red and green, blue and orange, that's up to you. So you could decide on your color palette. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to add some white. Now what this white is, I'm going to be adding the outline of my bird. So typically I start with the head first. So what I'm doing is just kind of getting a general idea of the scale that I'm going to be working with. So when I'm drawing a bird or painting a bird, I like to start off with the head, kind of a circle shape. The body is kind of like a leaf shape. The tail is an extension of the leaf. And then lastly, I paint in the beak. You'll notice that when I'm painting, you're able to see some of the color that is coming forward on the background. So it's going to be a light color of the colors that I've placed down. And right now I'm just getting a general idea of where I'm going to be laying my bird. So I just put legs in. I'm outlining a little bit. If you need to pause at any point just to catch up, this might be a great time to stop. From there, I'm going to be adding just a little bit more color. I'm adding yellow. I'll add a little bit more violet, and then I'll keep adding on just a little by little. Right now I'm making a few mistakes, but what I'm doing is keeping those mistakes in mind as I go forward. I'm going to be fixing the mistakes as I correct them with the other paint, and you'll see that as we go forward. I'm not cleaning my brush. Instead, I'm using the color to its fullest extent, that I'm dipping it into a different color, and then using that color, and then I'm dipping it into another color. That way, some of the colors from the other times I've placed paint down will come forward as well. Like I said, if you need to pause at any point, go ahead and pause the video and then catch up. Now, with the bird or a form, it's always going to be darker underneath. And right now, I'm kind of like fixing the shape of the bird. So, but I want you to keep in mind that it's always darker underneath, especially if the light source is going to be on top. Now, if the light source is going to be on the bottom, then you would have it lighter at the bottom. But the light source is typically above us, such as the sun or lights, so forth and so on. I'm going to continue painting back and forth. If you want to follow along with my brush strokes, you can see a few of my brush strokes, and then pause the video, see a few of my brush strokes, and then pause the video. Right now I'm adding a little bit of yellow just to demonstrate some of the highlights, and right now I'm fixing my steak, so I'm painting into the background. So you'll notice that I'm going to be painting into the background along with painting on the object, the bird, and I'm going to keep going back and forth. The background is just as important as the foreground, which is the subject. As the paint dries, the richer in saturation the color is going to be when I'm dipping my brush in and laying it down. You'll notice that as the painting continues. I'm adding some highlights to the back of the bird, to the feet and the legs. And sometimes when I'm laying white down, and so that a color, like maybe it's a little bit more translucent, such as yellow, will show a little bit better. So sometimes when I do that, I'm just waiting for the other color. Some of the blues are a little bit translucent as well. So if you need a blue to really show up, like on a black background or a violet background or a red background, add white first and then add your blue. Or yellow is also very translucent. Same thing. Add white first and then add your color. I'm really blending a bunch on this piece. I'm adding the color, not really letting it dry. I'm working quickly so that I can still mix it with the colors that I'm laying down. You can also use some mediums out there that will slow down the process of drying. This is acrylic. Oil, if you're using oil out there, you wouldn't have to worry about it drying so quickly, but with oil, it takes a really, really long time to dry, so you have to wait a few days or weeks for yourself to layer upon it. Acrylic is a little bit faster. All right, now I'm going to be adding more saturated violet on the surface just to enhance the form of the subject. I'm going to be really painting it underneath the body, and you'll see that it looks like the bird is now tilted, or it's a little bit darker underneath, so it looks like there's a shadow. Even with just those few lines, you'll see that. With painting, you also want to think about using the color throughout your composition. I added too much white there, but I didn't freak out. All I did was add a little bit more violet and filled it in. I think I might have dipped my brush in the wrong color. I'm almost done adding the larger shapes of the bird on the surface. I'm using not the largest brush I'm going to be using. I'm going to be using a smaller brush. With that smaller brush, I'm going to be adding in the super fine details, such as the beak and the nails of the claws. So you'll see that as we go forward. I'm going to be using various colors throughout that time. But I'm still using the larger brush in order to create a little bit more idea of where I'm going to be laying my finer details in later. At any point you need to move the canvas, flip it around to paint, you can do that. I'm laying my hand on the canvas. I know that the area might be wet, but if I flip the canvas over, I know I would not have my hand on the canvas. Another way to go around that is to put your arm underneath your arm, underneath your drawing arm or painting arm, and that will elevate your arm but keep your hand steady. So right now I'm just gonna keep going in, adding more details to the eyes, to the beak, to the feet, to all the feathers. Just keep that in mind as we go forward. Pause the video at any point, but you can go and add your details at your own discretion as well. Keep in mind the direction of the feathers as well. So the feathers are going to go from the head to the tip of the tail. So you want to make sure the brush strokes are going in that direction. I'm adding in cast shadows, but I'm going to be using cross hatching in order to demonstrate that part because I do like the way it was looking. I was going to fill it in, but I started using some really fine thin lines with the little brush that I had. So I'm going to go vertical and horizontal with some of these cross hatching lines. I'm trying to demonstrate that the bird is on a surface, so that's why I'm creating a cast shadow. Now I'm going to go back and forth, making sure that I'm keeping in mind the direction of the feathers, adding in some really fine details with my little brush. Whenever you see a really strong shadow, such as like underneath the head of the bird, you'll see a really strong shadow. That's illustrated by the contrast between the really light pink that was created with the white and the purple, and I guess it's a light purple, and then having a really strong line against that with a darker purple underneath. I'm back to my larger brush right now, so I can get some more highlights in a faster amount of time. But I am going to go back to my smaller brush when I'm done adding in these shapes. Like I said before, you can always flip the canvas over. So I'm going to go back into the beak again, really define that shape, because it looked like the bird was smiling, and honestly, when you look at birds, they don't really smile, even though they make us happy. But I wanted to make sure that I gave it just a very neutral face. And then back to my small brush. So now I'm going to add in some more details, more highlights, and I'm going to be going over the surface, all over the surface of my bird. Now that I have a majority of my piece painted, I'm going to be adding in some more accentuation of color by adding spots and dots and stripes. And then filling in anything that I think is a little bit too bright, like such as the nails. The nails look a little too bright for me. So I'm going to add in some stripes and dots. If you want to add in any other type of pattern into your bird, this is the time to do it. As I'm looking at this video now, the bird looks like it was painted in red, but it was violet. So I took a better photo of it in order for you to see the saturation of the violet against the yellow. Enjoy, and I can't wait to see your birds. Make sure I see them by tagging me under Laura Studio Art on Facebook or on Instagram.